but I do agree with you. The growth in the government over the past decade is disgusting, and it's made us poorer. The problem Hugh has is that me, him, and the people in this room are pretty much the only people in New Zealand that think that. The two governments, the past Labour government and the current National government, that have dramatically increased the tax take and the amount of borrowing and the amount they spend, were and are, in the current case, overwhelmingly popular. People like lots of welfare and people like government spending. The reality is that parties like ACT are losing that battle, and we've got to look at how we can best win that battle. So firstly, I'm going to address Hugh's point about the growth of the state, and then I want to talk about two final points, which our team kind of want to hang our hats on. Well, I do. I haven't talked to the others about that. The first is the nature of discrimination and why it's worse when you're talking about socially liberal issues as opposed to economics. And perception. Why perception matters and why focusing on things like gay marriage, gay adoption, and liberalising marijuana laws will help parties like ours. So the first thing Hugh said, and as I already said, like, I totally agree with him, but most people turn off when you start using terms like dead weight loss and nominal, Hugh, I'm sorry about that. It's just not that interesting. Is that those two governments are overwhelmingly popular. And one of the reasons why I can see why they are is because how can a party like ACT say, we want you to take more responsibility for your own healthcare, and more responsibility if you lose your job, and more responsibility for your child's education, if on the other hand they intervene and stop you making decisions about your healthcare by wanting to increase taxes on cigarettes, or wanting to continue marijuana prohibition, or wanting you to stop children if you're gay? How on the one hand can you go, we want to take away from you, but give you nothing in return? The only way we're going to win the battle and say, you're going to be far better off, as we all know people would be, if you take more responsibility for your own healthcare and there's more private providers. If we say, well, on the other hand, you need to make decisions about what will affect your healthcare, and things like how much alcohol you drink, how many cigarettes you smoke, and whether or not you use chronic and marijuana. So we're never going to win the battle that Hugh wanted to go on and on about if we don't give something back to people. Because, like, he was preaching to the converted. Like, we all know the minimum wage is a bad thing. Most people don't get that. We need to teach them, and we need to give them something back in return. So that's why we should prioritise, even though the size of government is important, we'll only convince people that it's a bad thing if we give them some civil liberties in return. So now I'm going to talk about discrimination. And what David got up here and said is, he's like, the state's really big, the RMA is bad, we've all got high taxes. I agree, those things are bad. The point is that, though, to an extent, and I agree there are some circumstances when this is not true, but high taxes impact all of us. We're all exposed to the RMA. What we say here on this side is that socially illiberal laws discriminate against certain groups of people in really bad ways. We've already outlined things like gay adoption to you. And what these guys have said is, well, Parliament's becoming less interventionist. Okay, we've got so little intervention now that Parliament was so scared to legalise gay marriage, they had to create a whole other institution for fear of giving people in New Zealand the rights that they deserve. They're so scared of giving more homosexual rights, they won't let these people adopt children. So we say it's not becoming less interventionist. But also, we discriminate against particular parts of society, which we say, as a state, is particularly abhorrent and particularly dangerous. The other thing, and Peter and Paul talked to you about this, is that when it comes to drug laws, white middle-class people don't get caught with drugs. Poor Māori children do get caught with drugs. And that is a disgusting form of discrimination that the law creates. Because as Paul outlined, if two people are in a drug transaction, neither of them reports it, right? Because they're both benefiting from that transaction, as opposed to all other crimes like murder or assault. You know, if Stephen punches me in the face, I'm going to go and tell someone about it. If he sells me some marijuana, I'm probably not. He doesn't do that. So we say, and they've never addressed this. Paul got up here and said, basically, that means you're sending the police go out and search young Māori people for drugs, so therefore they're found with drugs more often, so therefore they continue to be searched more often than all other members of society. Often they're sent to prison, where they get exposed to more gang culture and more criminality. We say when the state endorses that kind of discrimination by the kinds of laws that it passes, it's particularly bad. Yes, the RMA is bad, but all of us in this room have to get a resource consent if we want to build a hotel. That's bad, but we're all exposed in the same way. The same is not true when it comes to social laws. So lastly, I'm going to talk about perception, and I'm going to try and keep to time, unlike the other people in this room. So, one of the people that convinced the most people, on a number of things actually, but on this issue particularly, when it comes to marijuana decriminalisation, was Milton Friedman. And one of the reasons, not only because he is a very learned man, is that he called it a marijuana cigarette and said that he'd never smoked it in his life, right? And it was pretty clear. He was pretty nerdy. You know that he didn't get into that kind of stuff. And the reason why he had legitimacy on that issue, for people that weren't interested in economics and didn't know that he'd won, various prizes in economics and, came up with like good theories of supply and monetarism, was because he got nothing to gain from decriminalising marijuana or from ending the war on drugs. He saw people impoverished and in prison as a result of this. And therefore, because he was seen as speaking outside his area and not in his own self-interest, he got particular traction with people because he was seen to be helping the greater good. As Paul outlined, whether it's a true perception or not, and of course I don't believe it is, people in the ACT Party are seen as wanting to lower taxes because they will get lower taxes themselves. That's not true, right? We all believe that lower taxes are really good for everyone in society. But what will make us even more popular if we're seen to come out and advocate for something that's not seen in our self-interest. It's seen as helping the poorest people in society. We could take a lot of things out of Milton Friedman's book. That is most definitely one of them. And for that, I'd like to conclude the affirmative team in this debate.